Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today we continue, we start this new month, but it's something that we did last year. Remembering our wellness, tribute to Mental Health Awareness Month. Month of May. Remembering is a very human thing for us to struggle with. Uh, Mental health has also been a topic that maybe, may cause loss, distress. Culturally, the significance can be overwhelming. Shame and distrust come hand in hand with some communities. Today, we have a returning guest, no stranger to the podcast. Thank you, Michael, for joining us in this discussion again.
Glad to be here.
I just want to say the disclaimer. I always start off. I know they're going to change to the 988, maybe. The text or when it comes to this crisis hotline. But if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately through the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I encourage all listeners around the world to find what resources they are. Resources may look different for each individual. Michael, I always say people say it better than I do. I could say words, I could put sentences together, but people have been notable in what they say. And in regards to community, some people think, and this quote goes, some people think they are in the community, but they are only in proximity. True community requires commitment and openness. It is a willingness to extend yourself to encounter and know the other. I think know the other really speaks to me. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Well, the thing about it is, some people, like you said, they think they're helping other people, but really they do things because they feel the need to be needed.
Yeah.
And when you feel the need to be needed, that is different than actually helping others and really doing it for the right reasons. Because some people, they'll be like, I want to be praised, so they'll do it and be like, look at me, aren't I so good? And that really doesn't help anybody because it's disingenuous. And if it's not a genuine care for other people, that could come across and lead to bad outcomes.
I like that you brought up this really delicate but really needed conversation to talk about. Is that I always think I work in the mental health field, and I always feel even my worst day is nothing compared to some of the people I work with each and every day. So for me, when I think about helping others or even helping people in my day-to-day, my personal life, it's not about me. It's not about me. It never was about me. And I think I like what you said, Mike, when our purpose is to be needed, it takes away from us actually listening and being part of the community that is helping. I think it's very delicate, but I feel it's necessary to mention that sometimes we have to ask ourselves, why are we even helping? Why are we doing what we do? We don't ask that. We don't reflect enough. But part of that reflection is these. I'm gonna segue to this next portion. It's hard to kind of say this, and I say this in with all not minimizing. This month can be very hard for some. It's remembering our wellness is the tagline for this podcast. But why do we remember pain? Ask yourself, why do you remember people you lost? Why do we remember completed suicides? I would say for myself, I only speak for myself. For me, it's because of the people I love, the people impacted by it as family members and a peer. Michael, can you share with me, looking back at this list, why could you share your take on why we may strive to remember these painful moments in our lives, whether it's recent or it could be a friend? It doesn't have to be directly connected. Why do we choose to remember this?
Well, the thing about remembering pain and loss is everybody has to understand that we're all going to have loss. You can't go through this world without loss or pain. but that pain teaches us how to enjoy the good times.
Yeah.
And when you have the pain or loss, yes, it hurts, but it teaches you a lesson of things you either don't want to do, but it also reminds us that the good times are, more joyous and are greater because of our pain and our loss.
Yeah, we can appreciate them more. We can recognize them more. A lot of times we don't really pause and reflect on what we already have. We look at what we don't have, and not to say this in jest, but I really like what you said in the beginning when we started, and it kind of segues really to this kind of underlying topic of how we don't reflect, how we don't remember things well about ourselves, and we don't ask ourselves why we do what we do. And this may seem counterintuitive, but I know for me, not to make it complicated, that I know that the people that surround me, people who are connected throughout my years, have an impact on how if I don't spend the time to think about why that happened, or why am I doing the things today, it'll be problematic, and I might just want that feeling of being needed, and it's pretty much more on the surface than actually saying, actually reflecting even deeper. And it has this word. It's untranslatable word, Mike. It's in it's in Welsh. It's herath. It says a homesickness for somewhere you cannot return to, the nostalgia and the grief for the lost places of your past, places that never were. When you look back at your elementary, you look back, right? Sometimes we don't remember things. We don't take the time, and sometimes those skewed memories can impact how we view things today, or how we remember things today. So when you see this word, even though it's weird that this is actually a word that's defined this way, what comes to mind with you, Mike?
The thing that comes to mind is a quote that I like. The past is a reference, not a residence.
Yeah.
And when you say that, it's good to look back in our past. It's good to learn from our past, but we can't, stay in our past.
Oh, yeah.
So when I think of this word, it just shows that, especially when it says, when we want to go back to places of the past, where places that never were.
Yeah.
That is a big thing, because some people, some people be like, oh, I wish it was the good old days. But what they don't remember is when they were going through that time, it was not the good old days. It's just something that they wish was, because they don't like change and they don't want to move forward, which is something that we all must do.
Yeah, and sometimes there's stages in recovery, and sometimes we're just getting our medication managed. Sometimes it's just maintaining, right, Mike? And sometimes we take actual steps to move forward, but you can't be maintaining and growing. I'm not saying this in spite, but if you're striving forward, when you're moving forward, you're actually getting out of your comfort zone. It's not comfortable. You know what I mean? When you're not comfortable, you grow. When you're too comfortable, there's no growth. Like if you're so comfortable, you kind of just maintaining, and sometimes you may get stuck in on these you may get stuck in limiting yourself. Obviously, each situation when it comes to mental health is very delicate, and I'm not minimizing the families and people who are impacted, but now segueing more back to the beginning when we're talking about community, destigmatization, stigmatizing all this is a big word. How do you feel a community can approach this topic, in your own opinion, when it says destigmatizing mental health? Because I think it's not as simple as just a linear view, because there's so many components, variables when you think about it.
The thing that is the hardest is starting the conversation. Yeah. Because some people, they don't even want you to start the conversation. And if you can't say, well, this is how it is. It may not make us feel good, but we need to address this. Otherwise, we won't get a chance to to heal and try to have that growth or that ability to move forward. Because if you always sweep it under the rug, or you say, well, we're just not going to talk about it, we're going to ignore it. There's a reason there's a saying, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Like,
yeah. And I feel like at the same time, you mentioned a very good point, is that it's uncomfortable, the conversations. Let me just say that again. These conversations are uncomfortable. I think sometimes we have this idea that it's going to be this awesome revelation when I talk to someone who doesn't really understand, and giving context to the generation gaps and how mental health has exponentially got more knowledge as of recent decades. It's understandable. You think about it, if you give it thought. People who've been alive and they're in their 70s, 80s, it's understandable that they're not familiar with this. So the conversations are going to be uncomfortable. But I learned more from my uncomfortable conversations, Mike, than my comfortable ones. I learn a lot more about myself, and even if I don't agree with the person, I learn about. I always get something from a conversation. Sometimes I tell people, whether in church or even people in my personal life or in the work I do, don't shy away from uncomfortable conversations. You can learn a lot from them, at least from my own experience. How has it been for you when it comes? Because I like what he said when he said we kind of assume that just because I have the knowledge, people will just accept it. But honestly, that doesn't happen. Obviously, we still have this stigma that's prevalent around the country when it comes to mental health. Any thoughts?
The thing a lot of people don't realize is the stigma is there because the people make it true. Like with stereotypes, especially.
Yeah.
People don't like stereotypes, and stereotypes are usually not good, but the stereotype is there because people make it true, and not only do they make it true sometimes, but they continue to perpetuate it.
Yeah, they reinforce it, and I feel that there is stereotypes, but one thing I would say on the other side is stereotypes doesn't mean you can't break the cycle. You get what I'm saying? Like, it is. And I want to hear more about you, Mike. I know you've been on the podcast for quite some time and you shared a lot of insight, and I really appreciate you, Mike. I want to ask you, if you tell me more about those listening, maybe they haven't heard you the first time listening to the podcast, a little about your story, and remind us why you do what you do. Why do you do this? Why do you work with the mental health community? Why is it so important to you? And a little bit about your story.
Well, just a brief history. When I was 15, I was diagnosed. And at the time, a lot of people around me said, oh, he's just going to become another statistic. So at 17, I was rushed into the program with SMA, where, I was able to get therapy and start med management. By 18, I was able to be stabilized because they found a medicine that worked for me, and it worked good. And then from then on there, through not only medication, but through education, really educating myself, I was able to go to college, get some college in, then come out and start really working in the community. And what I tell people is medicine is not the end all beat all. Yes, it could help, but you have to have a holistic view. That means you have to, not only educate yourself, but you have to really work to maintain your stable recovery. Because if you don't put in the actions, you can't, maintain it. And, some people may slip up, or, we may all, go through tough times. But when you really have that view of, I want to be well, and you take and you take baby steps. Like, people try to do too much sometimes.
Yeah.
But just being able to say, well, it didn't work today, but I'll try again tomorrow.
That is like one of the things that I really stress a lot was when it comes to recovery. Sometimes your best day is just getting out of bed. Sometimes the best day, like, that's all. But I really, Mike, I know you do a lot in the community. I know, and I just want to say I really appreciate what you do. You do a lot for NAMI. I just, I love having you on this podcast because you're a peer that's striving to better himself. There's a lot of stigma against that. Let's just be honest. A lot of what you can't do. Oh, this is too difficult for you. This is too much for you. But Mike, you keep going, and I just want to say kudos. Good job. All right, thank you for doing that, Mike. I also want to say this one quote from Coretta Scott King. He said, "The greatest of community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." I feel, I'm in the faith-based community, but this is a outreach. It's not proselytizing. But one thing that was notable when I thought about the Bible was the Good Samaritan. And I think a lot of times in the Good Samaritan is, the one question the guy asked Jesus was, "Who is my neighbor?" And I feel when we think of it, when we put restrictions, when it's not inclusive, it's only a few people. That's where you kind of see the disjointedness, and that's where I feel community can be better. I want to ask you, in your own words, why is community involvement important in remembering our wellness? I remember my wellness. Why is it important that the community remembers, Mike, in your words?
Well, a lot of people, we as human beings are social people. Mm-hmm. And even the ones that, don't socialize that much, they still need that human contact. They still need to feel like they're a part of something. Everybody needs at least one person that they can talk to and, vent to and feel like they could go to in their time of need. Mm-hmm. And, no man is an island.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you can be alone, you can like your solitude, but eventually you're going to have to come out, for supplies, or you're going to have to come out, for your own mental health, because you don't want to put strain on yourself by trying not to be a part of the community. And with the community, it's good for our wellness, is because you never know who can help you. It could be your neighbor. It could be your neighbor's kids. It could be your family members. It could be really anybody. You never know when somebody will be able to help you, or you be able to help somebody in return.
Yeah, and also the other notion is that if someone's listening and they're like, well, I know my wellness, I don't need the community. Well, sometimes it rains and it pours, Mike. When it rains and it pours, and it keeps pouring, building up that positive, supportive resources is important, humongously important, especially in community. That's why I say in the beginning, wherever you are in the world, whatever you're listening to this, find what resources it is. If you're faith-based, you like faith-based, whatever you believe, if there's a community that really is positive and you feel that'll be helpful, do it. Do what works, that is positive, like you said, holistic. I want to ask you, what would you like people? I'm asking each guest. I'm trying to ask each guest this month as we proceed through. What would you like people to remember regarding mental health today as we observe Mental Health Awareness Month?
The thing I want people to realize is, just because you're down, you don't have to stay down.
Yeah.
I like the quote, fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah.
So even if you fall down and you feel like there's no hope, or why am I still struggling? What's the point? The point is, as long as you make the effort,
Mm-hmm.
it will eventually, work out in the end.
Yeah.
Because even in the darkest night, the dawn comes.
Yeah.
So eventually your dawn or your sunrise will come.
Yeah, and I feel like every day cannot be a crisis situation. It's not sustainable. There are times when it's like it rains and it pours, but it's amazing. And in the crux and the basic core element of this podcast is inspiring hope. I feel hope is kind of looked at as like, well, what's use of it? Well, in a world that's so uncertain, I think hope is sometimes whatever that is, whatever resource, whatever brings you hope, can be a very big element in part of your recovery. The thing is, if you don't think there's another day coming, why would you care about another day? If you don't think that you could better, or if it doesn't matter what's going to happen because you are in borrowed time, why would you try to improve yourself? You get what I'm saying, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel how we look at hope. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of changes, and I don't minimize change. Change is hard, whether even it's good change. You get married, it's stressful. Whatever change there is, it is difficult. But at the same time, I find that there's also an opportunity, and it's inspiring to kind of hear people like yourself who people could tell you, like, you're doing so much, you don't have to do so much. I applaud you to continue that you continue to do. And I want to ask you any final thoughts. Kind of said a lot today, but any final thoughts you'd like to share to those listening today? This will be the beginning. This will be the first Thursday of May. This will start off May this month. So what would you like to share with those listening as we enter into the Mental Health Awareness Month?
Well, the last thing I would like to share is, a lot of people who aren't familiar with NAMI, well, we have 12 principles, principles of support, and one that I like that can be overlooked sometimes is principle number 5. We find strength in sharing experiences.
Yeah.
And when we share that experience, like I said, you never know who you can help, and you never know who can help you with these experiences. So just be open and be thoughtful in not only what you say, but in what you take in. And like Robert said, we want to have that hope.
Yeah, I like what you I was thinking when you just said, as we wrap up, sometimes we put you didn't say this, but we put boundaries, put like, only who is my neighbor in the quote from the Bible. The idea about it, when I say who is my neighbor, it restricts us because we don't know who could help us. It limits us because those uncomfortable conversations, maybe that one conversation you need to hear, or that person needs to hear from you. So that's why I feel a community is so important, that there's no stumbling blocks. There's gonna be people who are struggling. There's different parts of the journey, but understand that there are different parts of a journey. It's like, it's not they should be here, they should be there. That just promotes fear and squashes out hope. The idea is that we want to encourage one another, and I want to say thank you, Mike, again for joining on this discussion today. I want to also tell to those who are listening, remember to stay updated with all things Revive Ministries through the various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast, leaving you with this last quote. It's from Oscar Wilde. It says, "The smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention."